Listen to the entire torture story, and it will surprise you.
The town of Sablewood was not a place marked on many maps, and if it was, it would be easy to miss. Nestled between dense forests and towering mountains, it was the kind of place people drove through without stopping. But those who lived there knew better than to linger in the streets after dark. I remember the first time I heard about the smiling dog. It was late October, the trees had shed their leaves, and the wind carried whispers of winter. I was at the local bar, nursing a whiskey, when old Tom sat next to me, his eyes glazed with drink and something darker. "You heard about the smiling dog?" He slurred, leaning in close. His breath reeked of alcohol and fear. I shook my head, more curious about the story than I'd care to admit. "They say it appears out of nowhere," Tom continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "A dog with a human-like smile, standing at the edge of the woods, watching, waiting." I laughed it off then, attributing it to drunken ramblings. But the next day, a body was found. Young Sarah Mitchell, torn apart, her face twisted in a grotesque smile. The police were baffled, the townsfolk terrified. I couldn't shake the feeling that Tom's story had more truth to it than I was willing to accept. That night, I found myself walking the edge of the woods, the moon casting eerie shadows on the ground. It was there I saw it. A dog, large and black, standing still as a statue. Its eyes locked onto mine, and then it grinned. Not a snarl, not a baring of teeth, but a genuine, human-like smile that sent shivers down my spine. I ran. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath ragged. But the image of that smile was seared into my mind. Over the next few weeks, more bodies turned up, each more mutilated than the last, each wearing that same horrid smile. I became obsessed. I spent hours at the library, poring over old newspapers and town records. It was there I discovered the legend of the smiling dog. Decades ago, a man named Daniel Crowley lived on the outskirts of Sablewood. A recluse, they called him, with a penchant for dark rituals and forbidden knowledge. They say he was trying to summon something that could grant him power beyond imagination, but things went wrong. The townsfolk found his body in his home, surrounded by symbols drawn in blood, his face twisted in that same terrible grin. His dog, a massive black beast, was never found. I knew what I had to do. Armed with this knowledge, I returned to the woods, carrying a knife and a sense of dread that grew with each step. The air was thick with tension, the silence oppressive. It was there, at the edge of an ancient clearing, that I saw it again. The smiling dog, waiting, watching. I approached cautiously, my heart in my throat. "Daniel Crowley," I whispered, hoping, praying that the name held some power. The dog's smile widened, and it began to speak, its voice a guttural growl that seemed to come from the depths of the earth. "You know nothing of what you seek," it said, its eyes boring into mine. "You cannot stop what has been set in motion." With a scream, I lunged at the creature, my knife aimed for its heart. But it was faster, stronger. It knocked me to the ground, its teeth sinking into my arm. Pain exploded through my body, and darkness threatened to consume me. In those final moments, as the life bled out of me, I realized the truth. The smiling dog was no mere animal. It was the vessel of Daniel Crowley's twisted soul, a monstrosity born of dark magic and unfulfilled desires. As my vision faded, I saw it standing over me, that horrid smile etched into its face, and then there was only darkness. The legend of the smiling dog lives on, whispered among the townsfolk of Sablewood, a tale of horror and warning. Those who venture too close to the woods at night might see it, standing at the edge, smiling, waiting for its next victim. Weeks passed, and the terror that had gripped Sablewood only grew. Each night, the smiling dog claimed another victim, each more brutal than the last. The town was in a state of constant fear, and as the death toll rose, so did the desperation. I wasn't the only one haunted by the smiling dog. Others had seen it, too. Their accounts all held the same chilling detail, that horrible, human-like smile. Despite my near-fatal encounter, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to stop it. I recovered slowly, the physical wounds healing faster than the psychological ones. But each night, I dreamed of that clearing, of Crowley's voice, of the smiling dog's teeth sinking into my flesh. One night, in the depths of another sleepless struggle, a thought struck me. If Crowley's rituals had brought this nightmare to life, then perhaps there was a way to reverse them. I knew the risk, but the alternative was letting this horror continue unchecked. I began to gather the tools I would need, old tomes of forbidden knowledge, symbols drawn in blood, candles to light the way. My search led me to an old, forgotten journal, hidden away in the darkest corner of the library. It belonged to Father Callahan, a priest who had lived in Sablewood during Crowley's time. The journal detailed the priest's attempts to stop Crowley, to banish the darkness he had summoned. It was filled with ancient rites and prayers, but one entry caught my eye. To sever the bond between man and beast, one must confront the vessel and bind its soul. Only then can the curse be lifted. I spent days deciphering the cryptic text, preparing for the final confrontation. Every night, I practiced the rituals, honing my resolve. The fear never left me, but it was tempered by a burning need to end the bloodshed. The night came, cold and clear. I ventured back to the clearing, the air thick with anticipation. The symbols I'd drawn in blood seemed to glow in the moonlight, and the candles cast long, flickering shadows. I stood in the center of the circle I'd created, reciting the ancient words from Father Callahan's journal. The smiling dog appeared as if summoned by my voice, its eyes gleaming with malevolent intelligence. It circled the edge of the clearing, its smile never wavering. "You think you can stop me?" It growled, Crowley's voice echoing through the night. "You are a fool, like the priest before you." I ignored the taunt, continuing the incantation. The air around me grew heavy, charged with a palpable energy. The smiling dog lunged at me, but was stopped by the barrier of symbols. It snarled, pacing, eyes locked onto mine with a mix of rage and curiosity. "Daniel Crowley," I shouted, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my insides. "By the power of these rites, I bind you to this place, severing your ties to the vessel you have corrupted." The smiling dog howled, a sound that seemed to shake the very earth. It lunged again, and this time, the barrier shattered. I was thrown to the ground, the wind knocked out of me. The creature was on me in an instant, its teeth sinking into my shoulder, its claws raking my flesh. But I didn't stop. With the last of my strength, I reached for the knife at my belt and drove it into the smiling dog's chest. The creature howled in pain, its body convulsing. I chanted the final words of the ritual, my voice a mere whisper. The smiling dog's body began to disintegrate, the flesh peeling away to reveal the twisted, tormented soul of Daniel Crowley. His eyes met mine, filled with a hatred so intense it burned. "You may have won this night," he hissed, his voice fading. "But I will return. The darkness never truly dies." With a final scream, Crowley's soul was torn from the vessel, the smiling dog's body collapsing into a heap of ash and bone. I lay there, exhausted and bleeding, the realization of my victory sinking in slowly. Sablewood was safe, for now. But the darkness Crowley spoke of lingered in the back of my mind, a reminder that some evils can never be fully vanquished. As I stood and made my way back to town, I knew that the story of the smiling dog would become another legend, a warning to those who dared to meddle with forces beyond their understanding. And in the quiet, lonely hours of the night, I would always wonder, when would Crowley return? The town of Sablewood took a long time to heal from the terror inflicted by the smiling dog. People returned to their routines, but a shadow of fear lingered. I, too, tried to move on, but nightmares haunted my sleep, filled with visions of Crowley in his monstrous vessel. I became a recluse, much like Crowley once was, spending my days studying the occult, preparing for the day he might return. I knew deep down that this respite was temporary. Crowley's final words echoed in my mind, a sinister promise of his inevitable return. One stormy night, as lightning split the sky and thunder shook the earth, I felt a familiar chill. The air grew heavy, and I knew something was wrong. I grabbed my knife and flashlight and headed towards the woods. The same woods where this nightmare had started. The clearing looked different in the storm's fury, more menacing. The wind howled, and in its cries, I heard faint whispers, calling my name. The symbols from my last ritual had faded, but their ghostly imprints remained. I shivered, not from the cold, but from a sense of impending doom. The rustling in the bushes made me turn, and there it was. The smiling dog, but not quite. It was larger, more monstrous, its eyes burning with an unnatural light. Crowley's face seemed to flicker within its own, a horrible fusion of man and beast. "You should have left well enough alone," Crowley's voice hissed, distorted by the storm and the creature's growls. "Now, you will witness true terror." The smiling dog leaped at me, its jaws snapping shut inches from my face. I rolled to the side, slashing at it with my knife. The blade struck true, but the creature barely flinched. Blood, dark and thick, oozed from the wound, but it kept coming. I ran deeper into the woods, my mind racing. The ritual had worked before, but this was different. Crowley had grown stronger, and I needed more than symbols and chants. As I stumbled through the trees, I remembered an old legend about a weapon that could kill any beast, forged in darkness and fire. There was no time to hesitate. I headed for the abandoned church at the edge of town. It was rumored to house relics from the days when Sablewood was first settled, artifacts of power and protection. The church loomed ahead, its doors creaking open as I approached. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of decay and forgotten prayers. I searched frantically, my flashlight casting eerie shadows on the walls. Finally, in a hidden compartment beneath the altar, I found it. An ancient dagger, its blade black as midnight, inscribed with runes that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Armed with the dagger, I returned to the woods. The smiling dog was waiting, its smile wider, more sinister. Crowley's eyes glinted with anticipation. "You think that toy will save you?" he mocked, his voice echoing through the trees. "You are nothing, a mere insect before a god." Ignoring his taunts, I held the dagger high, reciting the incantations from Father Callahan's journal. The blade glowed, the runes flaring to life. The smiling dog lunged, but this time, I was ready. The dagger sliced through the air, and when it connected, the creature howled in agony. The ground trembled, and the sky seemed to tear apart as the smiling dog writhed in pain. Crowley's face contorted in rage and fear. I pressed on, stabbing again and again, each strike weakening the beast. With a final, desperate lunge, the smiling dog knocked me to the ground. Its weight crushed the air from my lungs, but I held firm, driving the dagger into its heart. The creature convulsed, its body disintegrating into ash and smoke. Crowley's screams filled the night, a cacophony of rage and despair, and then, silence. I lay there, battered and bleeding, the storm finally abating. The darkness receded, and for the first time in months, a sense of peace washed over me. Crowley was gone, his curse lifted. But as I looked at the dagger in my hand, I knew that evil could never be truly vanquished. It would lie dormant, waiting for another foolish soul to awaken it. Sablewood would sleep easy tonight, but I would remain vigilant, guarding against the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of the light. For a time, the town of Sablewood found a semblance of peace. The memory of the smiling dog faded into legend, a cautionary tale whispered around campfires. But I knew better. I remained vigilant, haunted by the knowledge that true evil never dies, it merely waits, It was a year to the day since I had banished Crowley and his beast. The anniversary hung heavy in the air, a grim reminder of what had been lost and what I had fought so hard to protect. That night, as the moon cast long shadows over the town, a feeling of dread settled in my gut. Something was wrong. I took my dagger, the black blade still humming with latent power, and stepped outside. The night was eerily silent, the usual chorus of crickets and owls absent. The town was asleep, blissfully unaware of the approaching horror. As I walked towards the woods, a scream pierced the night, a sound so raw and desperate it chilled my blood. I broke into a run, the dagger clutched tightly in my hand. The scream led me to the old cemetery, where headstones jutted out of the ground like broken teeth. There, amidst the graves, I saw it. The smiling dog, its form more monstrous than ever, stood over a lifeless body. Blood pooled around its feet, reflecting the moonlight in a gruesome display. The creature looked up, its eyes locking onto mine, and it grinned, a smile so wide it seemed to split its face in two. "Did you really think you could escape me?" Crowley's voice emanated from the beast, filled with a sinister glee. "I have grown stronger, and now, I am unstoppable." I charged at the smiling dog, the dagger aimed for its heart. It moved with terrifying speed, dodging my strike and knocking me to the ground. Pain exploded in my ribs as its claws raked across my chest. I rolled away, gasping for breath, the taste of blood in my mouth. The creature laughed, a hideous, guttural sound. "You are weak," Crowley taunted. "You are nothing." Summoning every ounce of strength, I stood and faced the beast. I remembered the final words of Father Callahan's journal: "To truly vanquish the darkness, one must sacrifice." As the smiling dog lunged at me again, I didn't move. Instead, I raised the dagger and drove it into my own chest, aiming for my heart. Pain surged through me, but I held the beast's gaze, refusing to look away. "No." Crowley's voice shrieked, filled with panic. The creature recoiled, its form flickering as if it were losing substance. The runes on the dagger flared to life, brighter than ever before. With my last breath, I whispered the final incantation, binding Crowley in his monstrous vessel to my own life force. The smiling dog howled in agony, its body disintegrating into ash and shadow, drawn into the dagger's blade. The pain was excruciating, but I held on, determined to see it through. As the darkness consumed me, I felt a strange sense of peace. Crowley's curse was broken, the smiling dog banished forever. Sablewood would be safe, but in the depths of the void, I heard a whisper, a promise of return, a vow of vengeance. Evil never truly dies, it merely slumbers, waiting for the next foolish soul to awaken it. Years later, a new generation in Sablewood would hear the legend of the smiling dog and the lone guardian who sacrificed everything to protect the town. They would dismiss it as mere folklore, a story to scare children, but as they grew older, a chill would sometimes sweep through the woods, and the whispers of the past would creep into their dreams. And those who dared to listen closely would hear a voice in the darkness, a voice promising that one day, the smiling dog would return. The years went by, and the legend of the smiling dog became a distant memory. Sablewood thrived, its residents blissfully unaware of the darkness that once plagued their town. But shadows have a way of creeping back, and evil, though dormant, is never truly dead. One stormy night, a group of teenagers decided to test their courage by spending the night in the old cemetery. They gathered around a campfire, swapping ghost stories, their laughter mingling with the crackle of the flames. Among them was Mark, a curious and somewhat reckless boy, always eager for adventure. "Have you heard the story of the smiling dog?" one of the boys asked, his voice low and conspiratorial. The others laughed nervously, but Mark's interest was piqued. "Tell us," he urged, leaning in closer. "They say it appears on nights like this," the boy continued, "a dog with a human-like smile, watching from the edge of the woods. And if you see it, you're marked for death." Mark's curiosity turned to unease as the wind picked up, causing the flames to flicker. He glanced around, half expecting to see the beast lurking in the shadows. The others laughed it off, but the tension was palpable. As the night wore on, the group began to drift off to sleep, the fire dying down to embers. Mark, unable to shake the feeling of being watched, wandered away from the group, flashlight in hand. The storm intensified, thunder rumbling in the distance. He found himself drawn to an old, weathered grave marked with strange symbols. As he knelt to inspect it, a chill ran down his spine. The air grew thick, and the forest seemed to close in around him. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the night. Mark spun around, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. There, at the edge of the woods, stood the smiling dog. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and that horrific, human-like smile spread across its face. Heart pounding, Mark backed away slowly, his mind racing. He had heard the stories, but he never believed them. Now, face to face with the beast, he realized the truth. The smiling dog was real, and it had returned. With a snarl, the creature lunged at him. Mark stumbled, falling to the ground as the beast loomed over him, its breath hot and foul. He scrambled to his feet, running for his life, the smiling dog in relentless pursuit. The storm raged around them, lightning illuminating the twisted features of the beast. Desperate, Mark made his way to the old church, its doors ajar. He burst inside, slamming the doors shut behind him. The silence was deafening, the storm's fury muted by the thick stone walls. He collapsed against the altar, gasping for breath, the reality of his situation sinking in. As he caught his breath, Mark noticed a glint of metal in the corner of the room. There, partially hidden by debris, lay the ancient dagger, the same one that had banished the smiling dog years ago. He picked it up, the weight of it oddly comforting in his hand. The doors of the church creaked open, and the smiling dog entered, its eyes fixed on Mark. Crowley's voice filled the air, a sinister whisper that sent chills down his spine. "You cannot escape me," it hissed. "I am eternal." With no other option, Mark raised the dagger, chanting the incantations from memory. The smiling dog howled, the runes on the blade flaring to life. The beast lunged, and Mark struck, driving the dagger into its heart. The creature convulsed, its form disintegrating into ash and shadow. Crowley's screams filled the air, a cacophony of rage and despair. But as the beast faded, Mark felt a surge of dark energy flow into him, the dagger burning in his hand. He stumbled back, the room spinning, as the power of the dagger began to consume him. The smiling dog was gone, but the curse had not been lifted. Instead, it had found a new host. Mark's vision, and he collapsed to the ground, darkness overtaking him. When he awoke, he was no longer the same. The dagger lay beside him, its runes dark and lifeless. He could feel Crowley's presence within him, a dark whisper at the edge of his mind. The smiling dog's curse had not been broken, it had merely shifted. Mark stood, the church silent around him. He knew he couldn't return to the life he once knew. The beast was now a part of him, and he would have to live with that darkness. But as he stepped out into the storm, a new determination filled him. He would learn to control the curse, to harness the power within. And he would be ready, should the darkness ever rise again. The legend of the smiling dog would continue, but this time, it would have a new guardian. In the depths of the forest, the shadows stirred, and the whisper of Crowley's voice echoed through the trees. The smiling dog was gone, but the darkness remained, waiting for the next chapter to unfold.